The sound came first, sharp, final, like steel cables snapping under load. Then the second sound, wetter. The kind that makes combat medics flinch because they know what it means. 301 Navy SEALs stood motionless, boots planted, arms frozen mid-cross. Every eye locked on the mat where two operators who'd walked on confident now lay writhing in pain they couldn't vocalize. The woman between them stood, breathing steady, expression unchanged, like she'd just demonstrated a drill instead of dismantling two careers in under 4 seconds. A younger SEAL in the back row broke the silence with a whisper that carried. What just happened? No one answered, because the men who knew were still processing the gap between what they'd expected to see and what their eyes had just witnessed. This wasn't entertainment. This wasn't theater. This was the moment 301 operators learned that the most dangerous person in the room might be the one they'd underestimated. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. 6 hours earlier, none of them knew her name. Let's go back. 6 hours earlier. The wind off the Atlantic came in bursts, sharp, wet, heavy with salt. It hissed through the metal catwalks of Triton Proving Grounds, a secluded naval training facility perched on a rocky peninsula where the coast bent hard against the ocean. Waves slammed into the cement bulwarks with rhythmic violence. The sound was constant, relentless. But it was distant now, muted beneath the hum of tension building inside the primary drill enclosure. The helicopter descended through low clouds, rotors chopping the air into thick, pulsing beats. Inside, Staff Sergeant Rowan Thayer sat with her gear bag between her boots, hands resting on her knees, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. She didn't look out the window, didn't need to. She'd seen enough coastlines, enough bases, enough places where men gathered to prove things to each other. The pilot's voice crackled through the headset. 30 seconds. Rowan nodded once. She reached down and tightened the strap on her duffel. Everything inside was organized, packed with the kind of precision that came from years of knowing that chaos could arrive in an instant and preparation was the only thing that kept you alive. The skids touched down on the landing pad with a jolt. Rowan unbuckled, slung the bag over one shoulder, and stepped out into the wind. The rotors were still spinning. The noise made conversation impossible. She kept her head down and moved toward the admin building, boots crunching on gravel. No one was there to meet her. That was fine. She didn't need a welcoming committee. Inside the building was cinder block and fluorescent light. Cold. Functional. A petty officer behind a desk looked up as she entered, glanced at her rank insignia, then back at his computer screen. Thayer, Staff Sergeant. That's right. He typed something. Slow, deliberate. Like he was looking for a reason to make her wait. You're the medical response instructor. Logistics, medical response. Cross branch, certified. He didn't look up again. Just slid a folder across the desk. Keycards inside. Barracks C, 3rd floor. Briefings at 1600 in the operations center. She took the folder. Thanks. The petty officer said nothing. Rowan turned and walked down the corridor, her boots echoing against the tile. Behind her, she heard him pick up a phone. Heard him murmur something she couldn't quite make out. Didn't matter. She'd been on enough bases to know when she wasn't wanted. The barracks were standard issue. Narrow hallways, metal doors with nameplates. Most of them had 2 or 3 names listed. Hers had one. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. Small room, single bed, desk, locker, window overlooking the training grounds. She set her duffel on the bed and unzipped it. Everything came out in order. Fatigues, boots, medical kit, training harness. She hung the fatigues in the locker, placed the boots beneath them, and set the medical kit on the desk. Then she sat down on the edge of the bed and exhaled. 18 months. 18 months since the North Atlantic, since the collapse, since the water and the pressure and the sound of men screaming into their comms while the structure around them buckled and groaned like a living thing dying. She closed her eyes, just for a moment, just long enough to push the memory back down where it belonged. When she opened them again, there was a piece of paper on the floor near the door, white, folded once. She stood across the room and picked it up. The handwriting was blocky, anonymous. "They're setting you up. Protocol won't protect you here." Rowan read it twice, then she folded it again and slipped it into her pocket. She didn't know who had left it, didn't know if it was a warning or a test, but she knew one thing. Whoever wrote it wasn't wrong. 18 months ago. The North Atlantic in winter is not a forgiving place. 200 nautical miles off the coast of Greenland, the water is black and cold enough to stop a heart in under 3 minutes. The wind howls across the surface in sheets of spray that freeze before they fall. And beneath the waves, the pressure is immense, crushing. The kind of weight that turns steel into scrap if the welds aren't perfect. The joint NATO training exercise had been running for 6 days. 3 nations, 12 vessels, 42 divers rotating through subsurface breach simulations in conditions most people would call suicidal. But that was the point. You didn't train in comfort. You trained in the worst environment you could create so that when the real worst came, you were ready. Rowan Thayer was part of the medical support team attached to the U.S. contingent. She wasn't there to dive. She was there to patch up the ones who came back broken. But on day 6, when the mini-sub carrying 8 operators lost power at 180 feet and the internal pressure blew a seam in the aft compartment, she became a diver whether she wanted to or not. The call came over the emergency channel at 0430. Structural collapse, flooding, multiple casualties. All divers accounted for, but 2 trapped in the aft section with water rising and the hatch jammed. Rowan was in her rack when the alarm sounded. She was dressed and moving before the second tone finished. Medical kit, dry suit, rebreather. She was on the deck in under 2 minutes. The dive coordinator was shouting into his headset. The backup team was already in the water. But the situation was bad. The mini-sub was too deep for a fast ascent. The hatch was stuck. And the 2 divers inside were running out of time. Rowan didn't wait for orders. She clipped into the descent line and dropped. The cold hit her like a fist. Even through the dry suit, even with the thermal layers, the North Atlantic tried to pull the warmth from her body. She ignored it, focused on the line, on the depth gauge, on the comms chatter in her ear. 100 feet, 120, 150. The mini-sub came into view. A dark shape against darker water, emergency lights still flickering inside. She could see the backup team working on the hatch, cutting torches underwater, sparks drifting like dying stars. She reached the hull and pulled herself along the exterior until she found the secondary access port. It was smaller, tighter, but it was open. She squeezed through. Inside was chaos, water halfway up the compartment. 2 divers floating near the ceiling masks, fogged, breathing hard. One of them was holding his chest. The other had his hand clamped around his thigh, blood seeping between his fingers. Rowan's brain shifted into a different mode. Not panic, not fear, just sequence. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3. She grabbed the first diver, the one holding his chest. His eyes were wide, panicked. She pulled his hand away and felt along his ribs. There. Broken rib. Puncture. His lung was collapsing. She reached into her kit and pulled out the needle decompression kit. 14-gauge catheter. She found the second intercostal space by feel, positioned the needle, and drove it through. Air hissed out. The diver gasped, his eyes focused. She held the catheter in place and turned to the second diver. The leg wound was worse. Femoral artery. He was losing blood fast. She grabbed her belt rig, stripped it off, and looped it around his thigh, high and tight. She cranked it down until the bleeding slowed. Not stopped, just slowed. Good enough. The water was still rising. They had maybe 90 seconds before it reached the ceiling. The comms crackled. Thayer backup team has the hatch. 30 seconds. She looked at the two divers. Both stable. For now. But if she signaled for extraction, the backup team would pull them first. Standard procedure. Get the casualties out. But the pressure differential was wrong. If they pulled these two through the hatch now, the rush of water could destabilize the rest of the structure, could trap the backup team, could kill everyone. She made the call. Hold extraction. Let the compartment equalize. The voice on the comms came back sharp. Thayer, you're at critical oxygen threshold. I know. You'll drown. Not if you move fast. Silence, then acknowledged. She stayed. Held the needle catheter. Held the belt tourniquet. Watched the water creep up past her shoulders, past her neck. The two divers were breathing through their rebreathers, eyes locked on hers, trusting her, believing she knew what she was doing. The water reached her chin, her mouth, her nose. She took one last breath and ducked under. 15 seconds, 20, 30. Her lungs started to burn. 45, 60. The edges of her vision started to go gray. Then hands grabbed her, pulled her up, pulled her through the hatch, into open water, into light. She surfaced gasping, choking, alive. The two divers surfaced beside her, both alive. On the deck of the support vessel, they wrapped her in thermal blankets and checked her vitals. She was hypothermic, oxygen deprived, but functional. A week later, there was a private ceremony in a room with no windows. A Navy Commendation Medal was placed in her hand. The citation was classified. The incident was buried in a report that emphasized equipment malfunction and downplayed human error. Captain Clayton Sutherland, the executive officer overseeing the exercise, called her into his office 2 days after that. He was a tall man, lean, silver hair, the kind of officer who looked good in uniform and knew it. Sergeant Thayer. Impressive work out there. Thank you, sir. He slid a document across the desk. I need you to sign this. She picked it up. Read it. It was a modified after-action report. The language was careful, clinical. It attributed the structural collapse to unforeseen environmental factors and made no mention of the fact that the welds on the mini-sub had failed inspection twice before being cleared for deployment. She set the document down. This isn't accurate, sir. It's accurate enough. It leaves out the equipment failure. Sutherland leaned back in his chair. Equipment failures are expensive, Sergeant. They require investigations. They delay operations. They make people nervous. People should be nervous if the equipment is failing. His expression hardened. You're a good operator, Thayer. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Sign the report. Move on. Everyone benefits. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she came to attention and spoke clearly. "I won't falsify safety records, sir." Sutherland's jaw tightened. "You're making a mistake." "Respectfully, sir, I don't think I am." She walked out. 3 weeks later, her orders came through. Reassignment, Triton Proving Grounds, Medical Response Logistics Instructor, a punishment tour. Everyone knew it. But Rowan didn't complain, didn't appeal. She just packed her gear and moved on. Because that's what you did. You took the hit. You kept your integrity. And you waited for the next fight. Present day, Triton Proving Grounds. The briefing room was half full when Rowan arrived. Rows of chairs facing a podium. A projector screen on the wall. Men in fatigues talking in low voices, some standing, some sitting. She took a seat in the back row and waited. At exactly 1600 hours, Commander Maxwell Harkness entered. The room quieted. Harkness was a career officer, square-jawed, gray at the temples, the kind of man who commanded respect without needing to demand it. Gentleman. And Sergeant Thayer. A few heads turned, eyes flicked toward her. She kept her expression neutral. Harkness continued. "Tomorrow at 1800 hours, we will conduct the annual Constraint Survival Readiness Audit. This is a demonstration and evaluation of advanced escape and neutralization techniques applicable to high-risk entrapment scenarios. Subsurface, confined space, hostile pressure environments." He clicked a remote. The projector displayed a diagram of a human body in a prone position with restraint points marked. "Our instructor for this evolution is Sergeant Thayer. She has been cross-certified in constraint survival protocols and has operational experience in subsurface rescue and trauma response. The demonstration will be observed by all 301 Navy SEALs currently in rotation at this facility." Rowan felt the weight of that number. 301. Not a handful. Not a platoon. The entire current rotation. Every operator on base. Harkness clicked to the next slide. Protocol for this demonstration is as follows. Controlled speed. No competitive force application. Clear safety boundaries. Volunteer attackers will simulate entrapment conditions. The instructor will demonstrate escape and neutralization techniques. This is not a test of strength. This is a test of technique and precision. He paused. "Let me be clear. This is an instructor qualification evaluation. Sergeant Thayer's performance tomorrow will determine whether we continue to integrate cross-branch instructors into advanced training pipelines. The stakes are high. The standards are higher." He looked directly at Rowan. "Questions?" She shook her head. "Good. Dismissed." The room emptied. Rowan stayed in her seat for a moment, letting the others file out. When the room was nearly clear, she stood and made her way to the door. In the hallway, 2 men were talking. Both tall. Both built like the kind of operators who spent more time in the gym than anywhere else. She recognized the patches on their fatigues. Poseidon Team. Known for brutal waterborne breach training. Known for egos to match. The first man, barrel-chested with a thick neck, glanced at her as she passed. His name tape read Briggs. What's she gonna teach us? How to duck. The second man, leaner but coiled with sinewy muscles, smirked. His name tape read Vance. This is diversity theater. Watch. She'll fold in 30 seconds. Rowan kept walking. Didn't look back. Didn't respond. She'd heard it before. Different base, different men. Same words. Let them talk. Tomorrow they'd see. The sun was low when Rowan walked out to the arena the next evening. Golden light slanting across the concrete. Shadows stretching long. The arena itself was open air. A large matted circle surrounded by metal risers on 3 sides, designed for demonstrations, for evaluations, for moments when the entire command needed to see something at once. 301 Navy SEALs were already there, standing in formation, tight rows, arms crossed, faces hard, watching. Rowan stepped onto the mat and set her gear bag down. She pulled out a training harness, a simulated tangle net, a pair of padded cuffs, standard equipment for constraint drills. She laid each piece out with care, checked the straps, tested the buckles. She could feel their eyes on her, could hear the low murmur of voices, not loud, not overt, just the hum of 300 men deciding whether she belonged here. Commander Harkness stepped onto the steel riser at the edge of the arena, his voice carried across the space without a microphone. This afternoon's drill will demonstrate close quarters reversal under simulated subsurface entanglement conditions. Our instructor, Sergeant Rowan Thayer, has been authorized to perform live demonstrations of release and neutralization techniques applicable to medics or divers trapped under hostile pressure. He paused. Let me be clear. Each maneuver is approved. All force will be controlled. The purpose of this session is to observe efficiency, not brute execution. Another pause. Then he added, Sergeant Thayer is also the reason 2 men are alive after a structural collapse off the coast of Greenland 18 months ago. So if you're expecting a performance, you're in the wrong place. The murmur died. The silence that replaced it was heavier. Rowan didn't react. She just knelt beside her gear and finished the setup. Harkness's voice cut through the quiet again. I need 2 volunteers to play the role of attackers. You will apply standard downward control. No competitive force. No escalation. This is a controlled demonstration. Before he finished the sentence, 2 men stepped forward from the front row. Briggs, Vance. Rowan looked up, saw them moving toward the mat, saw the way they carried themselves. Confidence. Arrogance. The kind of posture that said they had already decided how this was going to go. Harkness frowned. You both understand this is a controlled speed demonstration. No competitive force, no impact trauma. Briggs nodded. Of course, sir. Vance added, we'll follow her lead. Rowan watched them, studied their body language. The way Briggs tightened his shoulders, the way Vance flexed his gloves. This wasn't demonstration preparation. This was combat preparation. She stood slowly, adjusted her own gloves, took a breath. Then she spoke. Her voice was calm, level, loud enough for the front rows to hear. I'll demonstrate the standard release and counterpin. If the attackers escalate beyond protocol, the technique escalates proportionally. Harkness nodded. Understood. Rowan stepped to the center of the mat. Briggs and Vance circled to flank her. She could see it in their eyes now. The intent. The decision they'd already made. She lowered herself to the mat, back down, arms at her sides, legs aligned with the marking tape. Textbook prone restraint posture. She looked up at Harkness. Ready. He raised his hand. Begin slow phase contact. Briggs moved first, dropped his knee outside her left shoulder, planted the other across her sternum. But he didn't apply slow phase pressure. He came down hard, full weight. His forearm slammed across her collarbone like a steel bar. Vance followed, locked both hands around her ankles, drove his knees into her thighs. Competitive grappler wrap. The kind of hold you used when you wanted to dominate someone, not teach them. The arena went still. Every man watching knew the difference. This wasn't demonstration contact. This was real restraint, real pressure. Briggs leaned close, his breath hot against her face. "Show us something real, Sergeant." Vance tightened his grip until his knuckles went white. "Yeah, break free now." Rowan's eyes opened fully. Her breathing didn't spike, didn't quicken, but something behind her expression shifted. The stillness vanished. What replaced it was colder, cleaner, deadlier. She spoke, not loudly, not with emotion, just flat, clear, unmistakable. "You are no longer inside demonstration protocol." The front row stiffened. They knew that phrase. It was in the manual. Section 7.3, Code Trigger for Live Response Authorization. Briggs pressed harder. "Quit talking and move, Sergeant." Vance grinned, cold, confident. "Yeah, show us." Neither of them understood. Not yet. Not until it was too late. Because what they had just done was give her permission. Permission to stop demonstrating. Permission to start surviving. And Rowan Thayer had survived worse than this in places where the water was rising and the oxygen was running out, and the only thing between life and death was the ability to act without hesitation. Her body shifted, subtle, precise. Her left elbow rotated inward, found the pocket under Briggs's armpit. Her fingers hooked, locked. Then she moved, and the breaking started. Briggs never saw it coming. Not the shift, not the breath, not the exact micro-adjustment of her hips that transformed her body from pin target into loaded spring. All he felt was the sudden absence of resistance. The woman beneath him gave way, not from surrender, from calculation. Her body collapsed inward, drawing him forward, deeper into the trap he didn't know he'd walked into. His forearm pressed harder across her collarbone. Exactly what she wanted. Exactly what she needed. Her left elbow slid upward, smooth, effortless. It didn't rise with force. It pivoted along the line of his arm like a blade being drawn from its sheath. Before his brain could process the movement, her fingers had found the space just above his elbow, the soft, vulnerable pocket where nerve bundles ran close to the surface. She hooked, locked, pulled. Her opposite shoulder dropped back half an inch. Her hips torqued. Her spine twisted with the kind of precision that came from 10,000 repetitions in conditions where mistakes meant death. Then she drove. The sound that followed was organic, final. The crack of dry wood splitting under pressure. Sharp enough to echo across the open arena. Loud enough that men 3 rows back flinched. Briggs's shoulder capsule dislocated. His elbow hyperextended backward past its natural range of motion. The joint bent wrong, sickeningly wrong. And his body, 230 pounds of muscle and ego, jerked sideways as if yanked by invisible wire. He hit the mat chest first, hard. His face bounced against the vinyl. Air exploded from his lungs in a breathless wheeze that sounded like a balloon popping. His legs kicked once, reflexive, useless. His upper body was done, disarmed, disassembled, broken. 2.1 seconds from pin to collapse. The arena gasped. 301 men. One sound, audible, shocked, involuntary. Rowan didn't pause, didn't celebrate. didn't even glance at Briggs writhing beside her. She rolled up from her back in a single fluid motion. Her boots pivoted beneath her, her left knee planted lightly against the mat. Her arms came up, not in aggression, in readiness, balanced, controlled, waiting. Vance was still locked around her ankles. His brain was 3 steps behind his body, still processing what had just happened to Briggs, still trying to reconcile the image of his partner crumpled on the mat with the calm woman now kneeling 2 feet away. What the hell? The words came out strangled, confused. But his hands didn't let go. His training overrode his shock. Hold the position. Maintain control. Lock it down. He yanked hard on her ankles, tried to twist her into a compromised rollover. His knee came up fast to clamp across her shin. A grappler's instinct. If she couldn't stand, she couldn't fight. But Rowan had already shifted her weight. Her hips rotated off axis, deliberately misaligning her spine. Not to resist his pull, to redirect it, to use his momentum against him the same way she'd used Briggs's weight. Her left leg slid behind his wrist, not fast, just precisely timed. Her heel caught the inside of his forearm, right above the ulna, between muscle and joint, exactly where the radius and ulna met, in a joint that could handle compression but not lateral torque. Vance pulled. She dropped. Her full body weight drove downward and inward, twisting, leveraging, turning his own grip into the mechanism of his destruction. The snap was different from Briggs's crack. Wetter, thicker, like a green branch torn apart instead of snapped clean. The radius fractured mid-shaft. The ulna displaced. Soft tissue tore. Vance's body jolted backward. His hands flew off her legs. His face twisted into something between confusion and agony. His mouth opened, but the sound came late, delayed, as if his brain needed time to catch up to what his nervous system already knew. My arm. My arm. My fucking arm. He staggered back 2 steps, cradling his forearm against his chest, his elbow bent at an angle that made men in the front row look away. Rowan rose, slowly, deliberately. Her boots found the mat with quiet precision. Her back straightened. Her breathing remained even, steady, controlled. She didn't step toward Vance, didn't lunge. She simply pivoted, rotated on her rear foot, reestablishing her stance, as if she'd never been pinned at all. Vance's breathing turned shallow, rapid. His mouth opened and closed. He half-stepped forward like maybe he could still salvage this, still prove something, still walk away with his dignity intact. Rowan moved before he could commit. 1 step forward, fluid, measured. She lowered herself beside him, placed 1 palm on the back of his neck. The other hand braced his damaged elbow, not with aggression, with stabilization, preventing him from jerking away and making the injury worse. Her voice was neutral, clear, clinical. Stop resisting. Your arm is no longer stable. Vance froze. Not from fear, from recognition. She wasn't retaliating. She was containing him, protecting him from himself. She had stopped the break at the joint, hadn't driven it through the shoulder, hadn't shattered the wrist, hadn't disabled anything she didn't have to. She had held back. The 301 men watching saw it. So did Vance. For the first time since stepping onto that mat, the smirk was gone. The arrogance vanished, replaced by something quieter, something that looked like understanding. This hadn't been luck. This had been control. Measured, clinical, dangerous only because it could have gone so much further and didn't. No one moved. Not a twitch, not a whisper, not a single boot shuffling against concrete. 301 Navy SEALs stood frozen in formation, jaws slack, eyes wide, locked on the scene in front of them. 2 men down, both incapacitated. One clutching a dislocated shoulder and hyperextended elbow, the other cradling a fractured forearm, both making sounds that weren't quite screams, but weren't quite words either. Guttural, broken. The kind of noise that comes when pain arrives faster than the brain can process it. And the woman standing between them looked like she'd just finished a training drill. Not a demonstration gone wrong. Not a violent confrontation. Just another evolution. Another scenario. Another problem solved with surgical precision. Rowan Thayer rose from her crouch beside Vance, stepped back 3 paces, came to parade rest, boots aligned, hands clasped loosely behind her back. Her breathing hadn't spiked. Her face showed no emotion, no satisfaction, no anger. Just the same quiet focus she'd carried since stepping onto the mat. She turned slightly toward Commander Harkness at the edge of the arena. Medical response required for both. That was all she said. Her tone didn't tremble. Her hands didn't shake. Her stance didn't project vindication or triumph. Just procedure. Just the next logical step in a sequence of events that had escalated beyond demonstration parameters and now required medical intervention. Around her, the mat was chaos. Briggs lay crumpled on his side, moaning incoherently, one arm limp and twisted at his side. Vance knelt 3 feet away, holding his forearm like it might detach if he let go. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Just breath. Fast, shallow, panicked. The silence in the arena was absolute, suffocating. The kind of quiet that happens when something breaks the normal order of things so completely that no one knows how to respond. Then movement. A medic sprinted in from the edge of the perimeter, kit in hand. Another followed 10 feet behind him. Both dropped to their knees beside the injured men and began emergency stabilization, checking vitals, bracing joints, establishing baselines. But even as they worked, their eyes kept flicking up toward Rowan. Quick glances, uncertain, like they weren't sure whether to treat her as the instructor who'd just demonstrated a technique or the operator who'd just put 2 men down. One of the medics was older, graying at the temples, tattoos running up both forearms. He looked familiar. His eyes narrowed as he worked on Vance's arm. Then recognition sparked. He glanced up, spoke quietly, just loud enough for Rowan to hear. North Atlantic, you're the one who saved Kowalski and DeSantos. Rowan's expression didn't change. She gave him a look. Sharp, brief, the kind of look that said, don't. The medic got the message, went back to his work. But the words had been spoken. And in an arena filled with 301 men, standing close enough to hear a whisper, information traveled fast. The murmur started in the front row, low, rippling outward like a stone dropped into still water. North Atlantic, the sub collapse. She saved 2 guys while pinned herself. That was her, heard she nearly drowned. The context was shifting, transforming. 60 seconds ago, most of these men saw Rowan Thayer as a reassigned instructor, someone who'd been shuffled to Triton for reasons no one quite understood, a woman in a role that made some of them uncomfortable and others openly skeptical. Now they were hearing something different, a story that carried weight in their world. Divers saved under pressure. Life or death decisions made in collapsing structures with water rising and oxygen failing. The kind of situation where most people froze, where training either held or shattered. And she'd held. In the third row, a veteran SEAL with silver hair and more combat ribbons than most men earned in a career leaned toward the operator beside him. His voice was quiet but certain. That wasn't power. That was surgical. The words carried, spread, reverberated through the formation like an echo. Surgical. That was the word. That was what they'd witnessed. Not a brawl, not a fight, not even a contest, just anatomy, physics. Leverage applied with the kind of precision that came from understanding exactly how joints failed and exactly how much force was required to disable without destroying. Commander Harkness stood on the riser. His clipboard hung loose in his hand like he'd forgotten he was holding it. His face was unreadable, controlled. But his eyes kept moving between Rowan and the two injured men and the 301 SEALs who'd just watched something none of them would forget. He didn't speak. Not yet. Because what could he say? The demonstration had gone off protocol. But the fault wasn't hers. The footage would show that. The witnesses would confirm it. Briggs and Vance had escalated. She'd warned them. They'd ignored the warning. And she'd responded exactly the way the manual said she should. Near the back of the formation, a younger SEAL, barely past his pipeline evaluation, leaned toward the man beside him. How did she do that? The answer didn't come. Because the men who understood what they'd just seen were still processing it, still trying to reconcile years of assumptions about size and strength with the reality of a woman who just folded two elite operators in under 4 seconds using nothing but technique. Rowan didn't move from her position, didn't look around for approval, didn't scan the crowd to gauge reactions. She just stood at parade rest and waited. Waited for the medics to finish their work. Waited for Harkness to give the next order. Waiting the way operators wait when the mission isn't finished, but the immediate action is complete. Professional, controlled, ready for whatever came next. The medics lifted Briggs onto a stretcher. He was conscious, but barely. His face pale, sweating. His good arm clutched across his chest. They moved him carefully toward the waiting ambulance at the edge of the facility. Vance refused the stretcher, stood on his own, walked under his own power with one medic on each side supporting him. His forearm was splinted and wrapped. His face was a mask of pain and something else, something that looked like shame. As he passed Rowan, he stopped, just for a second, met her eyes, opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, then closed it again, nodded once, small, almost imperceptible. Then he kept walking. The arena began to empty, slowly, men filing out in formation. But the energy was different now. No one was talking. No one was joking. They moved in silence, processing, absorbing, carrying what they'd witnessed back to their units where it would be discussed and debated and dissected for days. Rowan bent down and began collecting her gear, packing the harness, rolling the tangle net, returning everything to the duffel with the same care she'd used laying it out. A shadow fell across the mat. She looked up. Commander Elias Thorne stood at the edge of the arena. 52 years old, 19 deployments, half his body marked with scar tissue from shrapnel and burns, and all the ways men got broken in combat. He didn't speak often, didn't need to. His presence carried authority that had nothing to do with rank and everything to do with what he'd survived. He stepped onto the mat, walked directly to Rowan, extended his hand. She straightened, took his hand. The handshake was brief, firm. No words exchanged, none needed. But 301 men had seen it. A senior operator, a legend in the community, validating her publicly, sending a message that didn't require translation. Thorne released her hand, turned, walked away. The last of the formation filed out. The arena emptied. Rowan finished packing her gear, shouldered the duffel, walked toward the exit. Behind her, the mat was empty. No blood. No evidence of what had happened except for 2 slight depressions in the vinyl where bodies had hit. In an hour, someone would smooth those out, reset the mat, prepare it for the next evolution. But the memory wouldn't smooth out, wouldn't reset, would stay with every man who'd watched it happen for the rest of their careers. Because they'd seen something that changed the equation, something that made them reconsider assumptions they'd carried for years about who belonged in their world and what it meant to be dangerous. They'd seen control. They'd seen precision. They'd seen a woman demonstrate in 4 seconds what most of them spent years trying to learn. And now they had to decide what to do with that. The debrief room was cold, sterile. 3 chairs on one side of a metal table, 1 chair on the other. 3 cameras mounted in corners, red lights blinking. Rowan sat in the single chair, hands folded on the table, back straight, expression calm. She'd been here before. Different base, different incident, same process. Across from her sat 3 officials. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Ashford, Naval JAG. Legal officer with 20 years in military law. Glasses perched on her nose. Tablet in front of her displaying footage from multiple angles. Master Chief Torres, SEAL Command representative. Forearms like tree trunks. Face weathered by decades of sun and salt water. Eyes that missed nothing. A civilian contractor. Safety Oversight Director, clipboard, pen. The bureaucrat in the room whose job was to ensure protocols were followed and liability was managed. Ashford spoke first. Her voice was professional, measured. Sergeant Thayer, at what point did the training evolution deviate from approved protocol? Rowan answered immediately. No hesitation, no uncertainty. At the moment, Petty Officer Briggs applied full-force compression to my collarbone with his forearm, and Petty Officer First Class Vance locked my ankles in a competitive restraint hold. There was no indicator of controlled speed or demonstration technique. They violated simulation structure the moment contact began. Master Chief Torres leaned forward slightly. "You're certain the force was competitive?" Rowan met his eyes. "Yes, Master Chief." There was no gradual application, no technique demonstration. They initiated with combat-level pressure designed to dominate, not instruct. The safety director made notes, scribbling rapidly. Ashford tapped her tablet. The screen in front of her showed footage from camera 4, wide angle, clear view of the entire mat. She played it from the beginning. The footage showed everything. Harkness giving the order, Briggs and Vance approaching, Rowan assuming position. Then the slam. The lock. The immediate escalation, crystal clear, undeniable. Ashford paused the video. "Did you issue a verbal warning before engaging countermeasures?" Rowan nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Exact words. You are no longer inside demonstration protocol." Ashford cross-referenced something on her tablet. "That phrase is in the training manual. Section 7.3, Live response clause. Code trigger that authorizes instructors to use necessary force when safety protocols are violated. She looked up. The phrase was said clearly, loud enough for surrounding personnel to hear, "Yes, ma'am." Multiple personnel in the front row confirmed they heard it. Torres pulled up his own tablet, scrolled through something. We have preliminary statements from 27 SEALs who were present, all consistent. Instructor issued proper warning. Attackers ignored it. Response was proportional to threat. The safety director stopped writing, looked up. Was the level of force used proportional to the threat? Rowan's answer was flat, clinical. I did not apply force. I redirected theirs. They created the leverage. I used their positioning against them. Both breaks occurred because they maintained pressure after being warned. The injuries are consistent with their own actions, not mine. Ashford played more footage. The break sequences slowed down, frame by frame. Briggs collapsing, Vance staggering, Rowan stabilizing Vance's arm instead of escalating further. The civilian contractor spoke for the first time. The injuries are severe. Petty Officer Briggs sustained posterior shoulder dislocation, torn ulnar collateral ligament, and complete elbow hyperextension. Petty Officer Vance sustained mid-shaft radius fracture and ulnar displacement with associated soft tissue trauma. He paused. That's career-altering damage. Rowan didn't flinch. I stopped at joint disable. I did not drive through the shoulder. Did not fracture the clavicle. Did not target the wrist. I used minimum necessary force to neutralize the threat. Torres looked at her, long, assessing. Then he nodded slowly. You held back. Yes, Master Chief. You could have done worse. Yes, Master Chief. Silence. The cameras kept recording. The red lights kept blinking. Ashford scrolled through more files. During our preliminary investigation, we discovered something. An email was sent to both Petty Officers Briggs and Vance 24 hours before the demonstration. She turned her tablet around, showed the screen to Rowan. The email was short. Anonymous sender. Blocked header. But the message was clear. Make sure tomorrow's audit maintains standards. Don't let shortcuts compromise the teams. Rowan read it twice. Coded language, deliberate ambiguity, plausible deniability built into every word. But the intent was obvious. Encourage them to test her, push her, make her fail. Torres spoke. We traced the IP address. It originated from Naval Special Warfare Command Administrative Network. We're opening an investigation. But you're not pursuing it, Rowan said quietly. Torres's expression didn't change. We're pursuing what we need to pursue. Right now, that's determining whether you violated any protocols. The answer is no. You followed procedure. You issued proper warning. You responded appropriately. Ashford closed her tablet. Based on footage analysis, witness testimony, and procedural guidelines, no violation of conduct, force, misuse, or insubordination will be filed. The civilian contractor nodded. Agreed. Torres stood. You're cleared, Sergeant. Dismissed. Rowan rose, came to attention, nodded once, then turned and walked to the door. Behind her, the three officials remained seated, watching her leave. When the door closed, Ashford spoke quietly. She's not a problem, Torres replied. She's a standard. The civilian contractor looked between them. What about Briggs and Vance? Torres didn't hesitate. Medical separation, both of them. Effective immediately. The investigation took 2 hours. The consequences took 2 days. By 48 hours after the incident, official reports had been filed, medical evaluations completed, administrative actions processed. Petty Officer Second Class Garrett Briggs, medical separation from active duty. Diagnosis: posterior shoulder dislocation with torn ulnar collateral ligament and complete elbow hyperextension. Prognosis: 18 months minimum recovery, unlikely to return to operational status. Official cause: injury sustained during unauthorized application of combat force during controlled training exercise. Petty Officer First Class Callum Vance. Removed indefinitely from Poseidon Team operational track. Medical evaluation: mid-shaft radius fracture with ulnar displacement. Estimated recovery: 12 months. Misconduct logged: violation of instructional boundary during designated demonstration event. Performance profile flagged: unfit for training environments requiring force moderation. Both men were removed from the Triton rotation schedule. No farewell formation, no send-off. Just gone. And the woman who'd put them down was still there. Still arriving at the training compound at 05:30. Still running diagnostic checks on equipment before drills. Still moving through the facility with quiet efficiency. Still saying little. Still doing more. On the 4th day following the incident, something changed. Evening, 1900 hours. The main chow hall was half full. Men eating in clusters, talking quietly. The usual post-training exhaustion settling over the room like a blanket. Rowan sat alone at a corner table, tray in front of her, going through notes on a tablet, reviewing tomorrow's training schedule. She didn't notice the group approaching until they were standing beside her table. 8 men, all senior SEALs, all with enough time in service that their faces carried the particular kind of wear that came from years of hard work in harder places. The lead operator was in his late 30s, graying beard, scar running from his left eyebrow to his hairline. Name tape: Morrison, Sergeant Thayer. We need to talk. Rowan looked up, set the tablet down, stood. Her posture shifted subtly, not aggressive, just ready. Morrison held up a hand. Not like that. We're not here to test you. Then why are you here? He glanced at the other 7 men, then back at her. We need you to teach us what you did. Not for ourselves, for our teams. Real-world scenarios. Entrapment. Hostile restraint. The situations where size doesn't matter and technique is the only thing that saves you. Rowan studied them, looking for deception, for mockery, for any sign this was another setup. She didn't find it. Morrison continued. We've all been in situations where we've seen good operators die because they tried to muscle their way out of a bad position. What you did on that mat, that was something different. That was leverage, physics, precision, and we need to learn it. One of the other operators stepped forward, younger, maybe 30. I've got a team deploying to urban environments in 3 months. Tight spaces, hostile populations. If one of my guys gets grabbed, I need them to know what you know. Rowan looked at them for a long moment. Then she nodded once. 20 minutes. Mat room 3. By the time she arrived, there were more than 8. 20 operators, then 30, then 40. Word had spread through the barracks, through the team rooms, through the informal network that connected men who spent their lives training for the worst and wanted every possible advantage when it arrived. Rowan stood at the center of the mat. No fanfare, no introduction, just got to work. She called for a volunteer. A big man stepped forward. 6'3", 240 pounds, built like a linebacker. Pin me the way you would in a real situation, full force, no holding back. The big operator hesitated. "Ma'am, I don't want to hurt you." "You won't." He moved, fast, competent, dropped his weight across her shoulders and locked her down with textbook technique. Rowan spoke calmly, explaining as she moved, "Force doesn't originate from muscle mass. It comes from positioning. Leverage ratios. Exploiting anatomical weak points." She demonstrated, slowly, breaking down each component of the movement, where to place hands, how to rotate hips, which joints to target, the angle of pressure required to disable without destroying. Then she did it again at full speed. The big operator hit the mat, not injured, just controlled, neutralized. He stood up, shook his head in disbelief, and got back in line to watch more. Rowan moved through different scenarios: wrist locks, ankle manipulations, cervical spine controls. Each one explained with clinical precision. Each one demonstrated on volunteers of different sizes. The technique worked on a 220-pound operator the same way it worked on a 160-pound operator, because it wasn't about strength. It was about understanding how joints failed and using that knowledge with surgical accuracy. The crowd grew. 50 men, 60, spilling out into the hallway, watching through windows, and Rowan taught, patient, precise, adjusting technique for body types, correcting hand positions, answering questions with the kind of expertise that came from years of practice and real-world application. She didn't showboat, didn't lecture, just demonstrated, over and over, until the men watching started to understand. This wasn't magic. This wasn't superhuman ability. This was just training, practice, repetition, understanding mechanics and applying them without hesitation. Near the doorway, Commander Maxwell Harkness stood watching, unnoticed by most of the room. He'd been there for 20 minutes, observing, assessing. What he saw wasn't just technique instruction, it was leadership. The ability to command respect through demonstrated competence, to teach without condescension, to elevate others without diminishing herself. He pulled out his phone, opened his notes, started typing. Promotion recommendation, Staff Sergeant Rowan Thayer. Lead Instructor Constraint Survival Protocols. Effective immediately. He'd submit it tonight. The sun hadn't cleared the horizon when Rowan arrived at the training compound 2 days later. The sky was still that particular shade of gray that comes just before dawn. Cold, quiet, the kind of morning where sound carries differently, where boots on gravel echo louder than they should. She'd been awake since 0400, couldn't sleep, not from anxiety, not from stress. Just the weight of what was coming. Another demonstration, another evaluation, another 301 pairs of eyes watching to see if what happened 4 days ago was skill or luck. She knew the answer, so did most of them. But knowing and believing were different things. And in a community built on proving yourself over and over once was never enough. Commander Harkness had called her into his office yesterday afternoon. Brief meeting, 10 minutes. He'd told her about the second demonstration. Advanced trauma medical response under physical constraint. Same audience, same stakes, different scenario. He'd also told her something else. Something he didn't need to say but chose to anyway. They're not coming to test you this time. They're coming to learn from you. She'd nodded. Understood. But understanding didn't make the pressure lighter. It just changed its shape. Now she stood in the equipment bay organizing her medical kit, checking supplies, running through scenarios in her head. The demonstration was scheduled for 0900, 3 hours away. Enough time to prepare, not enough time to overthink. Footsteps behind her, measured, deliberate. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Commander Elias Thorne stopped a few feet away, hands clasped behind his back, face impassive. The scars on his forearms were visible beneath rolled sleeves. Burn tissue, shrapnel damage. The kind of marks that told stories he'd never speak out loud. "You ready for today?" Rowan glanced at him. "Yes, sir." "Good, because half the men watching will be looking for reasons to dismiss what happened 4 days ago. The other half will be looking for confirmation that it wasn't a fluke." She zipped the medical kit closed. "Which half are you in?" Sir Thorne's expression didn't change. "Neither. I already know what you are. I'm watching to see if you know." He turned and walked away, left her standing there with those words hanging in the air like smoke. The arena looked different in morning light, sharper, harsher. The shadows were gone. Everything exposed. Nowhere to hide. 301 Navy SEALs assembled in formation, same as before. But the energy was different. No murmurs, no skepticism, just attention, focused, waiting. Rowan stepped onto the mat carrying her medical kit and a training dummy designed to simulate a combat casualty. She set both down and began the setup. Methodical, precise. No wasted movement. Commander Harkness took his position on the riser, his voice carried across the arena without strain. "This morning's demonstration covers advanced trauma medical response under constraint conditions. The scenario: subsurface cabin breach with critical casualty, limited space, limited tools. Time-sensitive injuries requiring immediate intervention." He paused. "Sergeant Thayer will demonstrate emergency field procedures applicable to high-pressure environments where standard medical protocols cannot be followed. This is not theoretical training. This is operational knowledge proven under real-world conditions." The formation remained silent, attentive. Harkness continued, "What you're about to see has saved lives. It can save yours, or your teammates. Pay attention." He nodded to Rowan. She knelt beside the training dummy, positioned it to simulate a collapsed diver. Then she began speaking. Her voice was clear, educational. The tone of someone who'd taught this before. Who'd done this before, who knew every word mattered because someday someone in this audience might need to remember them under pressure. The scenario is tension pneumothorax, collapsed lung, air building in the chest cavity with no way to escape, pressure increases, heart gets compressed. Patient has minutes before cardiac arrest. She demonstrated on the dummy, palpating the chest, finding landmarks by touch, no visibility, just anatomical knowledge and practiced hands. You need to find the second intercostal space, right here, 2 fingers below the clavicle. Mid-clavicular line. You can't see it underwater, can't see it in darkness. You find it by counting ribs. Her fingers moved with surgical precision, demonstrating the technique, breaking it down into components any medic could replicate. Needle decompression, 14-gauge catheter. You insert at a 90-degree angle, perpendicular to the chest wall. Drive it through until you feel the pop. That's penetration into the pleural space, Air will hiss out. Pressure releases. Patient can breathe. She walked through the entire procedure, step by step. Then she did it again, slower, pointing out common mistakes, explaining how to avoid them. The audience watched in absolute silence. Men who'd seen combat, men who'd treated casualties under fire, men who'd lost teammates because they didn't know this technique or didn't execute it correctly. This wasn't entertainment. This was survival knowledge, and they absorbed every word. Rowan moved to the second scenario: arterial bleed, femoral artery severed by debris, blood loss critical, standard tourniquet not available. She demonstrated improvisation, using a belt, a piece of cloth, anything that could create compression. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, showing exactly where to place pressure, how tight to cinch, how to verify the bleed had stopped. Then she brought forward 6 SEAL medics. Had each one practiced the technique on the training dummy, corrected hand positions, adjusted angles, provided feedback that was direct but constructive. One medic, younger than the others, struggled with finding the anatomical landmark. His hands hesitated. Rowan placed her hands over his, guided them to the correct position. Feel for the notch, 2 fingers below the thyroid cartilage. There, that's your landmark. 1-inch incision horizontal. Trust your training. The medic tried again. This time he found it. Around the arena, men watched the teaching process, saw her patience, her precision, the way she elevated others without making them feel inadequate. This was leadership. This was what command looked like when it wasn't about rank or authority, but about genuine expertise shared without ego. Commander Harkness watched from the riser, made notes. His expression remained neutral, but his pen moved steadily across the page. 40 minutes into the demonstration, the PA system crackled to life. Medical emergency, repelling Tower 3, compound fracture, possible arterial involvement. All available medics respond. The arena froze. Real emergency. Real consequences. Rowan didn't hesitate. She grabbed her medical kit and sprinted toward the tower. Behind her, the 301 SEALs broke formation and followed, not interfering, just witnessing. Because this wasn't demonstration anymore. This was the test that mattered. The one you couldn't practice. The one that showed whether skills held under actual pressure. Repelling Tower 3, she was 200 yards from the arena. Rowan covered the distance in under 90 seconds, kit bouncing against her back, breathing controlled, mind already shifting into triage mode. The scene was chaos. A SEAL trainee lay at the base of the tower, his left leg bent at an unnatural angle, mid-femur, bone visible through torn fatigues, blood spreading across the ground beneath him. 2 instructors knelt beside him, one applying pressure, the other calling for medevac. Rowan dropped to her knees beside them, kit already open, hands moving. How long has he been down? 3 minutes. Fell from 40 feet. Rope failed. Rowan assessed the leg. Compound fracture. Femur snapped clean. Sharp bone edges visible. Heavy bleeding, but not arterial. Not yet. But the femoral artery ran right alongside that bone, and if a bone fragment shifted wrong, it would sever. She spoke quickly, calmly. Direct instructions to the 2 instructors. I need manual traction. Pull the leg straight. Don't let it rotate. Keep constant pressure. One instructor grabbed above the knee. The other grabbed the ankle. They pulled. The trainee screamed, his back arched, but the bone fragments realigned. The bleeding slowed. Rowan pulled supplies from her kit, splinting materials, gauze, pressure bandages. Her hands moved with absolute certainty. No hesitation, no second guessing, just training executed under conditions where mistakes killed. She packed the wound, applied the splint, wrapped it tight enough to stabilize without cutting off circulation. Checked distal pulse. Found it. Good. The artery was intact. The trainee's breathing was rapid, shallow, his face pale. Shock setting in. Rowan looked at his face, made eye contact. Stay with me. You're going to be fine. Medevac is 2 minutes out. Your leg is stabilized. You're not going to lose it, but I need you to stay awake. Talk to me. What's your name, Patterson? His voice was weak, shaking. Where are you from, Patterson, Texas? San Antonio. Good. Tell me about San Antonio. Keep talking. Stay focused. He did, rambling, half coherent, but conscious, engaged, fighting the shock. In the background, the sound of helicopter rotors grew louder, closer. The medevac bird landing on the adjacent pad. Flight medics jumping out with a stretcher. Rowan gave them the handoff briefing. Quick, precise, everything they needed to know. Injury mechanism, treatment rendered, vital signs, estimated blood loss. The flight medics loaded Patterson onto the stretcher, lifted him into the helicopter. The bird lifted off 30 seconds later, disappeared over the tree line. Rowan stood, wiped blood from her hands with gauze, repacked her kit. Her breathing was steady. Her hands didn't shake. She looked like she'd just finished a routine drill. But 301 Navy SEALs had followed her to this tower, had watched the entire sequence, had seen real emergency response under actual crisis conditions. Not demonstration, not simulation. Real blood, real injury, real life or death stakes. And they'd watched her move through it with the same surgical precision she'd shown on the mat 4 days ago. Same calm, same control, same absolute certainty in her actions. A senior operator near the back of the crowd spoke quietly to the man beside him. That wasn't training, that was instinct. That's what 20 years of experience looks like compressed into 20 seconds. The man beside him nodded. That's what a standard looks like. Rowan walked back toward the arena. The crowd parted, made space, not from fear, from respect. The kind that couldn't be demanded or assigned, only earned. And she just earned it again. 6 days after the incident on the mat, the formal promotion board convened. Standard procedure for lead instructor elevation. 3 senior officers, closed-door session, testimony review, performance evaluation. Rowan sat outside the conference room, waiting. She'd been called to appear at 1400 hours. It was 13:55. The door opened. A yeoman stepped out. Sergeant Thayer, the board will see you now. She stood, straightened her uniform, walked inside. 3 officers sat behind a long table. Captain, 2 commanders, all with decades of service, all with a particular bearing that came from making career-defining decisions about other people's futures. The captain spoke first. Sergeant Thayer, this board has reviewed your performance over the past week. We've examined incident reports, medical evaluations, witness testimony, and command recommendations. He paused. We've also reviewed 27 written testimonials from Navy SEALs who observed your actions during the constraint survival demonstration and subsequent training evolutions. He picked up a tablet. Read selected excerpts aloud. From a veteran breacher with 18 years of service, textbook crisis response under pressure, she could have caused permanent damage, but chose precision. They're lucky. She held back. From a Poseidon team member, Briggs and Vance had a reputation for rough treatment. They crossed lines before. This time, it caught up with them. Sergeant Thayer's response was appropriate and restrained. From a young SEAL completing a second deployment cycle, most controlled application of violence I've witnessed. Pure discipline, no ego, just technique executed perfectly. The captain set the tablet down. The pattern is consistent. Every testimony emphasizes your control, your restraint, your ability to neutralize threats without exceeding necessary force. One of the commanders leaned forward. We also reviewed footage of the emergency response at Rappelling Tower 3. Your actions saved that trainee's leg, possibly his life. The flight medics confirmed your field stabilization was textbook. Better than textbook. It was exceptional. The room was silent for a moment. Then the door opened. Everyone turned. Garrett Briggs stood in the doorway, arm in a sling, shoulder brace visible beneath his uniform. His face was thinner, paler. The look of someone who'd spent the past week in pain and reflection. The captain frowned. Petty Officer Briggs. This is a closed session. Briggs stepped inside anyway. Sir, I submitted a request for emergency testimony. I was told I could speak to the board. The captain glanced at his colleagues. They nodded. Brief, reluctant. But they nodded. You have 5 minutes. Briggs moved to the front of the room. Didn't sit, just stood. His good hand gripping the edge of the table for support. I need to state for the record, what happened on that mat was our fault, mine and Vance's. We escalated beyond demonstration protocol. We ignored Sergeant Thayer's warning. We forced her into a live response situation. His voice was steady but quiet, like someone confessing something they'd been holding inside too long. I've been in this community 11 years. I thought size and strength gave me authority, that physical dominance equaled competence. Sergeant Thayer taught me I was wrong. He looked directly at Rowan. Didn't look away. My shoulder might not recover full mobility. The doctors aren't sure yet. That's on me, not her. She stopped when she could have kept going. She stabilized my arm when she could have let me thrash and make it worse. That's discipline I don't possess. He turned back to the board. If this promotion is being considered, I'm recommending approval. She's the standard we should hold. If I ever return to training capacity, I want to learn from her. The room was silent, heavy. The kind of silence that follows when someone says something true and painful and necessary. The captain nodded once. Thank you, Petty Officer Briggs. Your testimony will be entered into the record. Briggs left. The door closed behind him. The board members looked at each other. No discussion needed. The decision was already made. Had been made before Briggs walked in. His testimony just confirmed it. The captain turned to Rowan. The board's decision is unanimous. Effective immediately, you are promoted to Lead Instructor Constraint Survival Protocol. Your techniques will be formally integrated into the Naval Special Warfare Training Curriculum. Protocol designations will be updated to reflect your methodologies. He stood. The other officers followed. Congratulations, Sergeant Thayer. Dismissed. Rowan came to attention, saluted, turned and walked out. No ceremony, no applause. Just a decision. Documented, filed, made official. the way she preferred it. The updated duty roster was posted the next morning, right beside the entrance to the operations center. Laminated, permanent. Lead instructor, constraint survival protocols. Thayer R., staff sergeant. No announcement, no speech. Just a name at the top of a column where it hadn't been before. But word spread fast. Within hours, every operator on base knew. Within days, the story had traveled to other facilities, other teams, other commands, and something shifted. Subtle, gradual, but unmistakable. The mockery stopped. The skeptical glances disappeared. When Rowan walked through the compound, men stepped aside, not from fear, from respect. The kind you give someone who's proven themselves beyond question. Training rotations began requesting her specifically. Senior operators attended her sessions, took notes, asked questions, applied her techniques in their own team rooms. The Thayer protocol became standard terminology, a formal warning system codified in training manuals, clear escalation procedures, mandatory third-party observers for demonstration drills. Her constraint escape techniques were documented, filmed, integrated into pipeline training. Future generations of SEALs would learn her methods without knowing her name. Just the techniques, proven, tested, reliable. 2 weeks after her promotion, a formal request landed on her desk. Transfer request from Petty Officer First Class Callum Vance. His forearm had healed to 80% mobility. Not enough for full operational status, but enough for training duty. He was requesting return to Triton, specifically requesting assignment to her training rotations. The written statement attached was brief. I need to learn from someone who has discipline I lack. I need to understand control I couldn't demonstrate. I'm requesting the opportunity to start over. As a student, not an operator. I'll accept any conditions required. Rowan read it twice, looked out the window at the training grounds, thought about the man who'd locked her ankles and grinned while doing it, the same man who now understood what he'd been missing all along. She picked up a pen, wrote one sentence at the bottom of the request. Approved. You start as student. You learn or you leave. No special treatment. Signed it. Filed it. Moved on to the next item on her desk. Redemption wasn't given. It was earned. And if Vance wanted to earn it, she'd give him the chance. Same chance she gave everyone who showed up willing to learn. 6 months passed. Winter turned to spring. Rotation cycles completed. New operators arrived. Others deployed. The rhythm of the base continued. Relentless, predictable, necessary. On a Tuesday morning in June, Rowan attended a graduation ceremony. SEAL pipeline completion. 32 candidates finishing one of the hardest training programs in the military. She stood in the back of the formation, observing, not participating, just watching. The candidates marched in, stood at attention, received their tridents, the symbol, the mark, the thing they'd fought for through months of pain and doubt and moments where quitting seemed like the only rational choice. But they hadn't quit. They'd finished. One name stood out on the roster. Petty Officer 3rd Class Bryn Keller, the first female candidate to complete the pipeline under the new integration trial program. Rowan had watched Keller's progression from a distance, knew about the hazing, the exclusion, the whispers that she'd wash out, that she didn't belong, that standards would be lowered to accommodate her. None of it happened. Keller finished in the top 15% of her class, earned her place the same way every man beside her earned his, through performance, through persistence, through refusing to quit when everything hurt and everyone doubted. After the ceremony, Rowan waited near the edge of the parade ground, away from the crowd, away from the families celebrating. Keller found her, walked over, still in dress uniform, trident pinned fresh to her chest. Sergeant Thayer. Rowan nodded. Congratulations. Keller hesitated, then spoke. I wanted to thank you. You showed me it was possible. Rowan's expression didn't change. You did the work. I just refused to quit when someone told me to. That's all any of us can do. Keller smiled. Small. Genuine. I heard what happened. On the mat. I watched the footage. That's what made me stay. Knowing someone had already faced worse and come through it. Rowan looked at the younger woman, saw determination, saw resilience, saw the future of something that had been impossible just a few years ago becoming inevitable now. The pipeline doesn't care who you are, only what you can do. You proved what you can do. Now go prove it again, every day, until it's not a question anymore. Keller nodded, understood, turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. Did you ever doubt yourself after that demonstration, after everything that happened? Rowan considered the question, thought about the North Atlantic, about the water rising and the pressure building and the choice to stay pinned 90 seconds longer than safe, about the mat and the breaks and the silence afterward, about every moment since then where people watched her differently, expected things, judged things every day. But doubt doesn't mean stop. It just means pay attention. Keller smiled again, walked away, back toward her family, back toward her future. Rowan watched her go, then turned and headed back toward the training compound. There was work to do, always work, always the next evolution, the next drill, the next operator who needed to learn something that might save their life someday. That evening, she was in the equipment bay, reorganizing medical kits, restocking supplies. The sun was setting. Most of the base had secured for the day. Just maintenance crews and a few dedicated instructors still working. Footsteps, measured, familiar. She didn't need to turn around. Commander Elias Thorne stopped a few feet away. Same position he always took, hands behind his back, face unreadable. The scars on his arm catching the dying light. You don't fold someone like that, unless they ask for it. Rowan glanced at him. They didn't give me a choice. That's exactly right. You didn't act out of anger or ego. You did it because they pinned you like amateurs and forced a response. That's the difference between discipline and violence, between control and chaos. He paused. Let that settle. Then continued. Those 301 men who watched you that day, they've all gone back to their teams. Every single one has told that story. Pass the lesson forward. That's how culture changes. Not through policy, not through speeches, through witnessed competence. Rowan set down the medical kit she'd been organizing. You think it matters, sir? One incident, one demonstration. Thorne's expression shifted slightly, almost a smile. Not quite. You've trained over 200 students in 6 months. You know how many have repeated that story to their teams. I don't track metrics, sir. All of them. Every single one. Silence. just the sound of wind moving through the equipment bay, metal creaking, ocean waves in the distance. Thorne turned to leave, stopped, looked back. Standards don't change because someone writes a new manual. They change because people see something they can't ignore, something that makes them reconsider what they thought they knew. You gave 301 men something they can't ignore. He walked away, disappeared into the shadows outside the bay. Rowan stood alone, looked down at her hands, calloused, scarred in places. The hands of someone who'd spent years doing hard work in hard places. She thought about the North Atlantic, about Briggs and Vance, about Keller graduating, about all the moments between then and now that had led to this quiet evening in an equipment bay where she was exactly where she needed to be, doing the work, training the people, making sure that when they faced their North Atlantic moment, they had the skills to survive it. That was the job. That was the standard. Not perfection, just preparation. Just passing forward what she'd learned so that others didn't have to learn it the hard way. She picked up the medical kit, finished restocking it, closed the bay, walked toward her quarters. Behind her, the duty roster was still posted outside the operations center. Her name still at the top, laminated, permanent. A statement that didn't require elaboration. Tomorrow morning, she'd be back at 0530, running diagnostics, preparing drills, teaching operators who would deploy to places where mistakes were measured in lives lost. And somewhere out there, 301 Navy SEALs carried a story, a lesson, a standard. About the day two men tried to pin down a woman they thought they could humble. About the 4 seconds it took to fold them both. About the silence that followed. About the respect that arrived without announcement or applause. About what real strength looked like when you stripped away everything but competence and control. They would tell that story for years, pass it to new operators, new generations. It would become legend, then myth, then just part of the culture, the foundation that everything else built on. And Rowan Thayer would keep doing the work, quietly, professionally, without needing the recognition or the spotlight or the validation, because that's what operators did. They executed the mission. They trained the next generation. They maintained the standard, not for glory, not for praise, just because it mattered, because lives depended on it, because someone had to. And she'd proven she was someone who could. 301 witnesses, one incident, a culture changed. Not overnight, not with fanfare, just one person at a time, one lesson at a time, one moment of demonstrated competence that couldn't be ignored or dismissed or explained away. That was legacy. That was impact. That was the difference between doing a job and changing how the job was done. Rowan reached her quarters, unlocked the door, stepped inside. Tomorrow would come early. It always did. But tonight, for just a moment, she allowed herself to acknowledge something she rarely admitted. She'd done what she came here to do, proven what needed proving, changed what needed changing. And now she'd keep doing it, day after day, year after year, until the next person came along and raised the standard higher. Because that's how it worked. That's how progress happened. One operator, one demonstration, one moment where someone stood up and showed everyone watching what was possible. 301 men had seen it, and they would never forget, neither would she.